Okay, welcome everybody. Really nice to be here. I don't make it to as many of these as I'd like to, but really excited to be here today. Welcome to colleagues from the University of Leeds and from our external colleagues as well, both our presenters and lots of people in the audience as well from outside of Leeds. Really nice to come together for this opportunity to hear about Octopus. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kat Davis. I'm the Dean for Research Culture at the university. So I'm tasked with leading the institution towards a more positive, inclusive research culture. We do that through 5 strands, and one of those strands is open research and impact. So yeah, as I said, really pleased to learn more about Octopus, this new platform for open and transparent research from Alexandra and from John. So to introduce Alexandra, first of all, Dr Alexandra Freeman is the Executive Director for the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication at the University of Cambridge, where I understand she helps professionals like doctors, journalists, lawyers, communicate risk and uncertainty better. So busy times, I'm sure. She's an advocate for open research practices, clearly, and the reform of science publishing systems, and leads the Octopus platform for primary research publication. But a slightly non-traditional entry into this world of open research, I would say. So previously, she's enjoyed a 16-year career at the BBC, working on series like Walking with Beasts, Bang Goes the Theory. She was the series producer of Trust Me, I'm a Doctor. And her work has won several awards, from BAFTAs to Award for Science Journalism from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. So that's all the official formal stuff. And I just wanted to say that I really love the Octopus story so far. I think it often takes people from outside of the narrower academic research track that lots of us have come in on to hold up those problems that we deal with, those kind of problematic systems that we work with, and propose solutions in a genuinely disruptive way. I think we've all had that experience of explaining to friends or family, you know, this is how we do things, and they kind of raise one eyebrow and go, really? And I think often it takes people from outside to go, how can we fix that? And it seems like that's what Alex has done. So it seems that she's traced back a lot of the problems, the major issues with research culture that I'm grappling with now, traced a lot of those back to the scientific publishing model, from the research publishing model, and these kind of perverse incentives that it can generate. So Alex spotted that, proposed a transformation to the Royal Society, and here we are. So Alex is also joined by John Kay today, who is the head of change at Jisc. And he's going to be speaking, I believe, after Alex, to highlight the potential of Octopus to positively disrupt scholarly communication. And together, that partnership received a major grant from Research England last year to develop Octopus into a new global service for scholarly communication. So enough from me. I believe the format is up there yet. So we've got Alexandra talking first, then John, and then lots of time for Q&A. So I'll hand over to our speakers now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kat. That's a very comprehensive introduction. I feel like you've almost said everything I have to say. So thank you. And it's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation to speak. So I'm going to just try and share my screen now. Hopefully this won't go wrong. And if for some reason I disappear, you never know with the internet, I will be on my way back. So apologies in advance if that happens. It sometimes does. So yes, as Kat said, I came back to academia a few years ago and did really kind of ask that question of, hang on a minute, why are we publishing the way we're publishing? And so I'm going to give a kind of a quick talk about the rationale behind Octopus and how it's supposed to work. And then, as Kat said, my colleagues from Jisc are here and are going to show you the new version of the platform, because Octopus is in its run-up to full launch at the moment. So the platform is being built as we speak. So we'll show you a little bit of that. So I don't really need to tell you what all the problems are with the current publishing system. These are kind of some of the ones that Octopus is trying to tackle. And all of these, I think, then have a knock-on effect on the research culture. So I'm really interested in not only trying to solve the immediate problems, but also the secondary problems that these bring to the way that we all approach research and the way we feel about the jobs that we do within the research system. And I just think that a hierarchical system that's based on really inequalities of access to this one single measure of success, this mythical high impact publication that funders and institutions and PIs are all encouraging us to get, is leading to the potential for problems in the research culture like bullying, questionable research practices, people just losing that sense of fulfillment and control in the face of this system. So I think we really do need to tackle, as Kat said, the real root of the problems in the publishing system. And in fact, as I think the whole of the research academia system that is linked to the publishing system. And I think that a lot of them come from just one key thing. And that's that journals are trying to do two things that pull them in different directions. The first thing that we think of journals doing is disseminating useful findings to people who might use them. Medical findings to doctors, engineering findings to engineers, findings for policymakers. All of this is really, really important, but it's all focused on just the results and the findings and what their impact might be. And that really drives the revenue of journals, and it's the most popular bits of journals for others to read because it's suited for a more generalist audience. And that leads to an aim in your writing for things to be attractive and readable, and drives things like word counts and publication bias. Nobody wants to read about negative results. And I think a lot of the questionable research practices, and I'll come back to those in slightly more detail. But at the same time, journals are acting as the primary research record, the record of what everybody's thought and what everybody's done. And that's a rather thankless task, because it's being a kind of patent office for establishing priority and a place to record full details of methods and full data sets. And that's quite a specialized form of communication and requires a very different way of presenting what you've done and what you've thought about. It needs everything in full detail, and it needs it presented in a very different format. And that specialized form of communication is quite naturally being sacrificed as journals bend towards serving the first one, which is a bigger audience. So I think the fact that you've got these two competing aims by the same providers, the same system, and the fact that this is in fact the only place where research gets recorded, and so this is where research is being judged for quality, leads to some really serious problems, because you're judging quality on the basis of publications that are designed to essentially sell a story and tell a simple narrative. So I think that what we can do is to split these two jobs, and that's what Octopus is. It's designed to be the new primary research record, to take on that second job and leaving journals free to do the first job properly. So then we don't have the incentives of good dissemination bending the incentives of good research practice. So Octopus then is designed to maximize access to primary research. So it's free to read, free to write, it's digital, it's got automatic language translation, or will have when we can get that built in. But it's also designed to set a new incentive structure to support good science. And that's really key to a lot of its design. And at the heart of that is breaking up the concept of a paper as the main unit of publication for research. So the research process, and I'm coming from a STEM background, but I'm trying to talk more generally because I think the research process is probably comparable and similar across humanities and arts as well, but this is something we can talk about in the Q&A. So that the research process naturally comes in a series of steps, one after the other. And each step requires quite different skills and actually quite different resources as well. And forcing people to get right to the end of this process before sharing any of it, and basically forcing them to come together to collaborate, people with different skills, to get to this one endpoint, I think causes so many problems. It forces this retrospective linear narrative to tell a nice story, and that forces a lot, or drives a lot, of potential questionable research practices, because it drives you to only be able to publish when data and findings support your initial hypothesis or your rationale, and to make a good readable story. So you're not publishing other things that happened along the way where you learnt by trial and error. And if your hypothesis turned out to be wrong, or you found something more interesting, you kind of have to force your narrative in a way that doesn't actually reflect what you were doing from the outset. And all of that's about questionable research. So instead, in a primary research record that's free of those dissemination incentives, we can instead allow a structure of publication that much more closely matches the actual process. So you've got different publication types for different parts of the research process, and each one is sort of linked to the one before it in the chain. If you're familiar with registered reports, I don't know if some of you might be, they're a different form of publication that are published in journals. And it's a bit like taking that concept to its ultimate conclusion, because in a registered report, you submit to a journal when you've got to the protocol stage, so you describe your hypothesis and your methods, and then you submit it and get in principle acceptance, and then you carry out the rest of the research and the journal's already accepted it. So it comes in two parts. It's a bit like that, but it comes in multiple parts. And we also don't necessarily expect the same people to be working on each different publication within this chain. I might be a brilliant hypothesis generator, but not have the resources or the skills or the capabilities to collect data or devise a protocol to test that hypothesis. So it allows me to become a specialist within the system and publish my work to the best of my abilities. And there's an eighth type of publication. You might think Octopus, 8, yes. So there are 8 types of publication, and that's a review. And reviews, these are peer reviews, can be published attached to any other kind of publication, of course. And they're treated and valued in the same way as all the other types of publication, because reviewing is a scientific or a research skill just like any other. And so we want to incentivize it and encourage good reviewing and good reviewing skills. So this is what the first prototype of Octopus looked like. So across the top, you can see that branching structure of linked publications. And it means that we've got this kind of research problem at the top, and then all the work that's been done by different people to help get to a solution of that research problem or that research question. But over there on the right-hand side, you can see a rating system. And now that is a really crucial part of allowing people to judge the quality and share their judgments of the quality of research over and above a review. And we've got a red flagging system so that if you're really worried about the quality, maybe there's some potential plagiarism or statistical errors, any kind of really red flag type problem, you can raise that and that will alert other readers. So that's something that's currently missing from the publication system, and I think is really important. So any logged in user, and we're using ORCID to log in, can rate publications. And you can see there that the ratings are on predefined criteria that are different for each publication type. So that allows us as a research community to decide what we think defines good quality for each type of publication. So for data, for example, it might well be a data set that is reusable. It's got enough metadata and enough description to allow other people to analyze that data. So I think this system has lots of benefits thinking back to the problems that we were trying to solve about the research environment. So of course it's quicker because there's instant publication. As soon as you're ready to click the button and your co-authors approve it, your publication goes live. because you're publishing in smaller groups, you've also got smaller author groups. Sorry, smaller publications lead to smaller author groups. That means it's much easier to see exactly who's doing what, which is more meritocratic and more accountable. If you weren't involved with the data collection and you're doing data analysis, if there was a problem with the data collection, that's not a reflection on you. Your analysis allows you to get credit for the work that you did with the data that was provided. And as I said, there's no need for this narrative structure. And I think that this genuinely is a problem, because a lot of these questionable research practices like harking or p-hacking is about trying to get data to fit a hypothesis. And now that's no longer important in this new structure. We don't have these pressures. And it means that researchers can share much more work. So we've probably all got work that we haven't published because maybe it's too small a data set to be accepted, or we haven't been able to collect data because we don't have the resources to do it. I mean, if you just think about Peter Higgs and the Higgs boson, if he hadn't been able to publish the idea of Higgs bosons, it would have been, you know, decades before anybody collected any data. So it's opening up that kind of, I've got an idea, we might not be able to collect the data for it, but somebody else, potentially in the future, maybe could. But as well as these sort of proximal improvements, I do think that there's a fundamental change in emphasis and how we would approach our work with this new structure. Because it's not all about findings and impact, which I get quite depressed now that I'm seeing so much from funders and from journals just going on about impact. And yes, of course, we all want our research to be usable and useful. But research is about doing your specialist bit to the best of your ability. It's about taking a sort of professional approach and thinking, this is where my skills lie. This is the bit that I'm going to do brilliantly. And because I'm doing this bit as well as I can and publishing it and sharing it openly, other people can do other bits to the best of their abilities. I have no skills in Bayesian statistical analysis, for instance, but I could publish data and somebody else could do a really interesting analysis of that data. We're both specialists in what we do. And by each doing our own little piece of the jigsaw, as it were, we can build this really big, solid research base from which important and solid research findings will emerge. But it's not about me trying to do every part, or even me and my immediate colleagues trying to do every part of the research process. So I think it just changes the way that we think about how we might work in the future and allows much more specialism and professionalism. And because it's all about doing things to the best of your ability, I think we really do need a good system of metrics for that. And that's really difficult. You know, everybody's been racking their brains to think about how best to create a metric system. I mean, at the moment, it's all so proxy. It's all about, you know, what journal it's in and whether a couple of peer reviewers have signed it off, essentially. And we all know that that's not a good way of judging quality of an individual publication. So the rating system is designed to really try and allow us to get down to what do we think are the criteria that mean good quality within a particular publication type, and then allowing people to rate on those criteria. And alongside reviews, I think the rating system will really help us all find good quality publications, and also to kind of see what other people think of our work and improve our work as a result of that. But of course, peer review, as I said, is as important as any kind of rating system, if not more important. And in Octopus, as I said, it's incentivized by being treated as a publication in its own right. So it's easy to write a review. You just click, write a review, and you treat a review like any other kind of publication. It's not a few words or a few comments. It's a proper in-depth critique. And then being able to read other people's critiques for publication allows us, in this open reviewing world, to all learn from other people's expertise and their own opinions of a piece of research. And learning how to critique the work of others is also an important skill for all of us. So this kind of post-publication peer review, it's something that happens in the world at the moment in some journals, but I think it just allows us this fast and unbiased publication of other parts of the research process, but it also has a whole system of advantages within itself. And as I said, it's important for us to recognize reviews as a publication type equal to all others. And that comes to how we recognize people's publications and their work as a whole in Octopus. And that's through your kind of own public CV profile page, which exists on Octopus. It's all linked. Everything you do on Octopus is linked to your public profile. And that means it produces a really useful set of metrics for institutions and funders. So here you can see in the prototype version of Octopus, I was an extremely prolific and very good author. And I published all these different types of publication. So that little wheel allows people to see what sort of specialist is this researcher. Are they publishing lots of good and well-rated peer reviews? Are they an ideas person? Are they an analyst? Are they somebody who's working on real-world scenarios and implementation? And then you can see everything that they've done and everything that they've rated. So hopefully this openness and transparency drives people's need or want to put quality above quantity. Because if you've got a vast load of publications, but they're all really poorly reviewed and poorly rated, then that's a reflection on your quality as a researcher. You're not doing the highest quality research. But instead, if you've got 3 or 4 publications perhaps that are very highly rated, then that shows that quality is important to you. And you know that is a good signal to potential employers and potential funders. So I think that this system will also be really useful, not just for researchers and for science and research community as a whole, but for institutions and for funders who are looking for high quality researchers and highly well rated parts of research that they can offer funding for the next step to. So Octopus won't be a good read. You know, everything in here will be designed for those who really want the full detail. But that's where I think journals then take over, and they can editorialize and write the good stories and the good narratives and disseminate the important findings to those who can use them. So in sort of summary from my point of view, there's something in it for all the different stakeholders within the research environment. You know, hopefully we're making it easier and nicer and better for researchers to publish, and easier for institutions to assess researchers, easier for funders to assess research and to choose what they want to fund, and to change the way that they think about funding potentially into smaller pockets of funding. I mean, for instance, they could see a well-rated protocol or idea and offer funding for the next step for data collection to multiple institutions or groups around the world, which would help reproducibility. And I do think that actually for journals, it takes away the difficult part of their job that's conflicting with what they're really well set up to do, which is dissemination. So I think that it's got real potential for everybody to benefit from this, and not least the research culture and research as a whole. But it does need all of us to come together to use this system and to change the way that we work to use the platform. And that's where the difficult bit comes in, because we're all fairly locked into the way that we work. So this is where all of us have to think about our place within the research environment and think, you know, can I actually publish my work and think in an Octopus way? And then, of course, I think of it as being, in the medium term, a bit like a preprint platform. You would publish your work in Octopus. That doesn't stop you then having a journal publication, you know, later down the line when you've finished all your work, to tick the boxes that you need to tick as part of your career at the moment before the whole world shifts. But I don't think that it actually would necessarily take too long for the world to change, because when something comes along that serves people's needs, I can see that people change to it. So that's what I'm hoping Octopus will do. So, as Kat said, we're in partnership with Jisc, who are building the new version of Octopus, which is a good, solid working platform. And we have partnership also with the UK Reproducibility Network and funding from UKRI. So I want to thank them and thank you. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to John and Lola, who are going to show you what Octopus looks like now.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, I'm John from Jisc, and we're really pleased to be working with Alex, UKRI, and UK Reproducibility Network to develop Octopus. This is a really quick word for me, as since the agenda was published, we've had a sort of last-minute lineup change, and Lola, our Octopus product manager, is now able to give you a sneak preview into what Octopus looks like. We're hoping to launch the platform in June, and Lola and our developers have been working really hard over the last couple of months, and we've now got to a stage where we have an alpha version that we can use to test with a user base and get some some quick feedback, so that we can get the best product out that we can in June. The kind of first lot of user testing will be starting, I think, tomorrow with our kind of first ever Octopus user community meeting. Yeah, so you're going to get to see the site before those guys. So I'll now hand over to Lola, who'll give you a first look at the site, and we'll also let you know how you can get involved in Octopus's development if you want to. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to Lola.
Great, thanks, John. So I will now hopefully seamlessly share my screen. Hopefully that's coming through okay. Great, thanks, John. So just to start off, so with a couple of caveats, I suppose. So this is our alpha release of the platform. So it is sort of pared down in terms of its functionality, and they're sort of, the devs are working on it continuously. We're having sort of new releases most days. Between now and our sort of beta launch date in June, we're going to be really sort of adding to the functionality of the site, addressing any bugs or issues, and really making sure that it's been thoroughly tested by the research community. But I'll sort of point out as I'm going through areas where we'll be adding additional functionality or sort of components, and sort of areas where things are currently still a bit rough and ready. So just to start off with the home page, you can see it here. So we open up with just sort of giving a bit of context on what Octopus is trying to achieve, and those main call to action as well. So Octopus will be free to read and sort of access all the content, and then free to publish as well. And then, as John touched upon, very much looking to generate feedback and get sort of a sense of the platform from the user community. So got this call to action about sort of submitting feedback and getting involved. We've also got a dark mode there, which I'll showcase. It's definitely our favorite within the team, so want to show it off. And then if I take a look at the sort of search functionality at the moment, so you can search from the heading, but there's also a sort of quick search bar here at the moment. Put in a current search term. So the search at the moment is fairly simplistic. It looks at title, content, and author, but that's actually something the developers are working on today, in fact, and for the next few weeks, is just making that a bit more sophisticated, as particularly as the content on the site grows. We're going to want to have sort of more granular ways of accessing the content. But at the moment, these search results should sort of feel fairly familiar in their format. The main difference, of course, being the publication type being surfaced there. And at the moment, you can filter by publication type. But between now and June, we are looking for sort of additional features that will be in place. So for instance, language will be a really important one, the language of publication, but also things like the author, the publication date, and then sort of longer term, we'll look at additional filters sort of based on user demand, really. We have a few ways of sorting and filtering the content, which again should feel fairly familiar. And then if you want to start an additional search, you can do so here, but we're also looking at ways where it would be a sort of an additional one rather than a separate new one. So say you wanted to add in additional search terms within your existing search. Another way of sort of finding content at the moment is our browse page. So at the moment, this is fairly simple. It's just showing latest publications by publication date. And then as well, you can sort of search by publication type. But one thing that we do want to showcase more is those links between publications that Alex was talking about. We think they're a really important way of sort of discovering and accessing content that's related to your particular area of specialism, for instance. So we are looking at ways to have a sort of more sort of like dynamic visualization of those links that a user can navigate through and discover content. That is quite a sort of ambitious project, and we want to make sure we get it right. So it probably won't be quite ready for the June release, but it's something that we're prioritizing because we do sort of believe very strongly in the value of those links. But for now, I'll just show you if you jump through to all publication types, you get that full search results listing again, but you can also look at authors. So at the moment, if you look at the publication page, you can see that that first name is just shown as an initial. The reason for that is to sort of mitigate against sort of immediate bias. At the moment, when you're looking at author search results, it should be showing the full name. That's something that the devs just need to tweak. I think it's come in a recent release. But just to give a sense of the author page, this is all users that are registered to the site at the moment. You can see that some of these ones are sort of dummy accounts. These are the ones that have the fake ORCID IDs. But if we look at the ones that were created most recently, you can see here that those are valid ORCIDs. And there I am. So I'll open my account up.
Have you actually published anything yet, Lena?
I haven't, no.
Still a lazy author.
So at the moment, you can see that is a live link to my actual ORCID page. As Alex touched upon, you do need to have an ORCID account to have an Octopus account. And at the moment, you can see, yes, I've been very lax on publishing on Octopus thus far, but I'll show you in a moment a sort of more enhanced page. But the plan is that this will also be pulling through information from your ORCID account. So for instance, your institution, your educational background, and any non-Octopus publications you might have. So if I go back to that author search results page, and find someone that's been a little bit more active than me. So here's one of our sort of dummy authors, and you can see that they've produced a number of publications. And yeah, as you can see that the breakdown is sort of surfaced of the types of publication they're producing. The hope is that over time, this is going to build up a sort of set of metrics that is useful for the individual for sort of showcasing what they're working on, and then also useful at the institutional and sort of funder level to see the type of researcher that someone is. You know, are they specializing in publishing protocols? Are they a statistician that focused on analyses, for instance? Do they do a lot of peer reviews? Are they active in that way? And then how is their work received sort of by their peer community? So at the moment as well, you can see just the links to their existing publications. And then if we click through to one of them, I can show you the publication page. So at the moment, this is fairly simple. They've kept it to the sort of essential components. So that's the publication type, the title, the authors, and then the full text. And then we've also got the license. At the moment, we're using Creative Commons licenses, but we've had some feedback recently about sort of additional licenses we might want to include, or some that we might want to remove based on, you know, how the site is going to be using that content. And then conflict of interest as well. So author has to specify, you know, that either that they don't have any, or if they do, that they need to detail that. But we've got additional components that we'll be adding in between now and June. So for instance, that rating system and the red flag system you can see is not currently on the page, but those are priority to get in. And then there are also some additional sort of content components like license, like language even, and also sort of funding. You know, people can specify and look up their funder and detail that. We are also looking at sort of more dynamic ways that people could list their references and have that be a live link through to that referenced material. But one thing that's important to surface, I think, on this page at the moment is that chain, those links between content. And so at the moment we're showing where in that chain of 7 that this publication lies, obviously reviews being treated slightly separately. And then we can also show what those links are. So as Alex said, every publication has to be linked to at least one at the previous level. So you can see this real world application is linked to one interpretation. And you can click through there and go through to that interpretation, and you can see actually it's got 2 real world applications. Ignore the formatting, it's a little dodgy looking at the moment. And then going, even previously, you can see, then click through to the analysis and then click through to the data. You can see they've published a sort of partial data set here, the thinking being that a full data set could be stored on a specialist repository. And you could continue going all the way back to the problems if you wished, and each time it updates and shows where there are multiple sort of children of that publication if relevant, or the parent of that publication. One thing we're looking at the moment and hoping to have in place by June is, again, a sort of slightly more dynamic way of accessing these links. So a visualization that will appear on this page that allows people to move through these links and really just sort of discover content in a more engaging way. But for now, we'll be working on making this list a little clearer, so making it clearer where it's a forwards or backward connection, for instance. So if I return to the home page, I will sign in, which will give me access to sort of the full functionality of the site. So basically, viewing content you can do as a non-logged in user, but if you want to engage in any way, for instance, of publishing your own content, publishing a review, rating, or a red flag, then you would have to be a logged in user with an active ORCID account. So you can see there that I'm now logged in. So if I wished, I could now publish. So just, minor caveat that the publication section is definitely like our most rough and ready section of the site at the moment, but I think it just is useful to give a bit of a sense of what this process will look like. So I can create a test one. So the type of publication, it can be any of those 8. And then, if you say create a review from a particular publication date, then this will be pre-populated to be a review. And then we've got the initial definitions here. We have worked on some more detailed definitions and examples, which will be linked to from this page. And then the user just needs to confirm that that's correct. And that's because after this page, you can't edit the publication type. And that's because of sort of differences in the content that you could submit for different publications. So I can then click create and it will, yep, it has worked. So now if I wish to, I could change that publication title, but as I said, the type can't be changed. So next would be adding links. Basically ignore the specifics of the design of this page, but really I just want to show that you will be able to add links. It will be in a different design than this. As you can see, this wouldn't be scalable at all, and the sort of actual design's a bit wonky. So we'd be looking at a way that you can properly search through the content on the site and find what you need. But one thing that is a bit cleverer about this at the moment is that it is filtering your options there based on what you can link to based on your selected publication type. So because this is a real world application, you can link back to interpretations. So it's just interpretations that are showing there. And then at the moment, we've also got the license type. You can show or hide the detail there. These are the current ones that we have listed, but as I said, we're going to rework some of the options there and maybe add some additional ones. I'm very happy to hear any suggestions you have around that, if there are any you think we definitely should include or look at. And then, does this publication have a conflict of interest? So again, we're slightly tweaking this so a user has to state that it doesn't or that it does, just to make that a bit more of an active choice. So I'm going to say that this doesn't have one. And then you open up the text editor. So at the moment, the this sort of design is going to be reworked to make it a bit easier to access, but at the moment this has standard heading and formatting functionality, as well as the means of putting in and editing a table. Currently not possible to put in figures, but obviously that's on the radar as something to put in as soon as possible, and certainly before June. And then once you had put in your text and edited as you wanted it, or in fact you could import text, that will be an option in a later release. You could then have the option to review and publish. So as this holding text says, this is something that you'll be able to just double check everything you've inputted and then click publish if you're ready. And the reason that review page is particularly important on Octopus is that you would sort of there's no sort of functionality to edit post-publication. If a change needed to be made, for instance, to resolve a red flag, then that would be released as a new version of that publication rather than an edit. And that's to make sure that any changes are completely transparent and logged on the site. So at the moment we've locked publication, but once we get user testers in, we'll be sort of going through that full process with them in detail. And then if I save and exit, and then I can see all of my drafts at the moment in my account. You can see all of the demos I've been doing. And then once something is published, it would appear down here in the live publication process. So this user account space is pretty pared down at the moment, but the plan is that we'll have sort of, for instance, a way of watching publications or bookmarking publications, and then this will be where you'll see notifications either about your own publications or publications that you've watched. So, you know, has a review been produced, has a new version been released, that kind of thing. But that was, yeah, that's my sort of whirlwind demo. I'm conscious of time. It'd be great to get your thoughts on sort of both of our presentations. Just a quick final comment, which is around basically ways to get involved if you're interested. So as John mentioned, we're launching a user community tomorrow, in fact. And then sort of from that point, we'll be doing weekly testing sessions to really get people sort of putting the platform through its paces. We've also got this feedback form. I'll pop in the chat that link to the user community space. And yeah, one thing that would be incredibly useful for us is if you think you or any researchers within your institution would be interested, just to spread the word and let them know that that's a way to find out more. But I will stop sharing my screen. I can see that questions have come in, so I will hand over to others.
Thank you. Yes, I've been trying to answer some of the quicker questions in the chat and leaving the ones that might need longer discussion. Shall I, Nick, and Kat, shall I just dig into some of the questions straight off from the chat?
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. Yeah, I don't know if you want to share, Kat, or there's I can't keep up. There's that much going on in the chat.
Sorry, most of that's probably me.
I've been trying to copy and paste some of the questions in because there's lots of great questions. So yeah.
Oh, great, off you go then. Pick the ones that you want answered.
Do you want to pick anything in particular, Kat? I know you had a few in there.
I don't want to pick my own. I just want to let's have a look at some of the major themes. Lots of questions about trolling and the quality of reviews and that kind of quality control and conflicts of interest on reviews, and leading into a kind of EDI issue there. I think those two are linked.
No, I was keen to discuss that one because a lot of the Octopus design is designed around trying to minimize bias potential. So that's why we don't allow any photos and we don't have first names or institutions on publications. So that when you're reading a publication, you're not upfront being given things that might even lead to unconscious bias, let alone conscious bias. Of course, if you click through to a person's page, you get to see their first name, not a photo. You could Google them and find a photo, of course. But what we're trying to do is just sort of take away the things that are really going to lead to unconscious bias, or could lead to unconscious bias. And in terms of trolling and that kind of thing, so everything you do on the platform is linked to your ORCID profile. You can't interact with it without being logged in. Now that means that everything will be visible and public and attached to your sort of professional identity, because your ORCID profile has your institution in it as well. That means, I hope, that sort of poor behavior that's allowed on sort of public social media, where you can have anonymous logins or it's not immediately obvious to your institution what you're saying and doing, will be obvious. And of course, there are going to be some difficult issues. There are going to be differences of opinion. But I'm hoping that transparency means that you'll be able to see what's happening. And if there are problems, institutions can address those. So one of the things is with red flagging, for instance. If a red flag is raised, what it does is it emails the author to say, somebody has raised this flag and this is their description of the problem. That goes to all the authors of a publication. The authors can then respond to that. I mean, maybe there's, you know, they've raised the genuine concern, but the authors have a good response. And then the red flag can be put down again by the people that raised it. If it doesn't get resolved, sort of author to author, as it were, then what we're looking at is a system where it automatically, and perhaps after 6 months or so, gets emailed to a research integrity office. Now, within the UK, that's fairly easy to do because every institution now has one. Internationally, that's much more difficult. And I think that's looking to the future of the platform, how that will work. But of course, there aren't easy answers for all these difficult questions straight away. I'm just hoping that we can be nimble and think to the future and try and be at least better than the existing system. So I'm hoping that transparency will breed better or good behavior, and that some of the systems like red flagging and that, you know, as I said in the chat, that can be reviews can be red flagged as much as any other kind of publication, will hopefully mitigate against some of that behavior.
Thanks, that's clear. I see the challenge. What else was I going to ask? Okay, so still on reviews, is there a response to review? Is the idea that these sections will kind of continuously evolve? Will there be a series of versions in response to each round of review?
So the platform does allow reversioning. So if somebody in a review brought up a really good point and you go, oh gosh, yes, I hadn't thought about that, then you can reversion your publication, and you can even include the reviewer as a co-author on the next reversion. But that new reversion doesn't carry over the ratings or the reviews, because obviously now it's different. So it would need different reviews and different ratings. Hopefully you've improved. And so really we're setting up reversions as a way of correcting the record, you know, correcting mistakes essentially, but not as something that's a continuous process, because we don't want, you know, this kind of feeling that it's constantly shifting. It is the version of record. It's just that if you've made a mistake or forgotten something really important that somebody points out, you do have an opportunity to revise that record. But the old version will always be available. It will have, you know, a DOI of its own. It will have the ratings and reviews of its own. So you don't get away from your past mistakes, but you can correct them.
Great, thank you. There's a few questions on the theme of this split between the narrative and the detail, and that was your starting point for today. I think that's a really, really interesting issue, and clearly the kind of major impetus for this. So Mary had a question about whether we anticipate that funding structures might change to reflect this more collaborative way. Currently, funding is very much about the whole, you know, the complete story. And Chris Dixon also had a related question about are we kind of expecting a separate or possibly duplicated journal publication to run in parallel with the material that's on Octopus?
Yeah, so I think this way of working will actually, or way of sharing work, will change the way that we actually do work. Because I think at the moment, I mean, I certainly know myself as a researcher, I have skills in some areas, I work with other people who have skills in other areas, and we all together collaborate to make a paper or a complete study. I'm limited in who I can collaborate with, because they're the people that I know, they're in my group, or they're in a group that we have an existing relationship with. there will be people out there in the world who are able to do much more interesting things in terms of collaboration and in the future. So I want to be able to collaborate worldwide and through time to get the best out of the research that we're doing. So I want to stop thinking about getting from the very beginning of a research question to the very end of implementation of findings in the real world being the job of one small group of people and another small group of competing people who are trying to do it differently. And instead, us all think about, what can I bring to this research problem? Where is my specialism? Where is my where are my skills going to be most useful? It may be that I have skills in multiple parts of that. I might be good at coming up with a hypothesis and a protocol and collecting data, but it's very unlikely that I'm going to be the best person in the world to do all 7 parts of that stage. So, and I want the best people in the world to be doing that. So I think it's a way of thinking of ourselves as becoming more specialist and defining our roles in a different way and thinking about the way we work in a different way. And I think that will change the way that funders think as well, because instead of these very big wasteful proposals that, you know, cost millions of pounds and spend a year putting it together, a grant proposal that then gets peer reviewed, we can be much more nimble. I mean, I'm a PI of a group where, you know, I'd be happy to put out a little gold flag on Octopus and say, I've got a few £1,000s for somebody to spend a few weeks doing this part of this study. You know, there's nobody in my group who can do this. Is there somebody out there in the world who can do it, and I'll pay for it. So I think it will change the way we approach it. And then I think the way that we disseminate findings to practitioners in the way that journals do will change, because it will sit separately from the world of the actual research that's going on within Octopus.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that sounds brilliant. It's a big cultural shift.
It is.
I'm sure you're aware.
I think we need it. I think we need
for a lot of researchers. Yeah.
So, you know, the research culture is problematic at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to ask something that wasn't actually in the chat yet, but I think it's important. I was wondering how Octopus can work for non-scientific disciplines. So, for example, literary studies where there's not a discrete data analysis, interpretation kind of structure.
Yeah, so this is something where we're really keen to talk, because my background, and I think the background of most people working on this, is in science. So we really need to understand the working processes of the wider research community. I've spoken to people who feel that it fits quite neatly, whether they're from arts or humanities, because their particular work is fairly driven in the same sort of way. With data collection, your data may not be what a scientist would think of as data. You know, there's qualitative data, but it may be your data is a museum object that's scanned in 3D or something completely different. But I think that process of inquiry, of thinking, what is my research question? How can I address this research question? If you're in purely theoretical world, for instance, then maybe those 2 parts on their own are a complete piece of work. But then maybe there's a method and a form of collection of data that is just very different from what I would think of as data. So I think what we need to do, and if any of you in this chat are humanities researchers or social scientists or arts researchers who work in a very different way, then do get in touch with us, because we'd really like to see how much adaptation we need to make to the platform to allow it to work with as broad a section of researchers as possible.
Thanks. We've got about 5 minutes left and the chat is going crazy. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to digest all of that. Let's move to hands up, please, if that's okay. Anything that's not been represented in the chat or I've missed. Bernadette.
Hi, Kat. Yeah, is it okay if I go? Thanks so much, Alex. It's so radical. It's hard to get my head around. But I absolutely love the ambition. I suppose a naive question is, with funding not secured past this, what happens if you publish something on the website and then you go bust, and where is it in the cloud? But the more pressing question than that is, but you know, how do you topple the publishing machine? Like the idea that you're going to take over from Nature, Springer, Elsevier, the thousands and thousands and thousands of journals that exist. You know, there's so much resistance out there, and Nick Shepherd and I have been in some interesting discussions, and I see that current editors, current peer reviewers, you know, people are quite resistant. So talk to me about how long-term is your long-term vision for taking over the way we publish?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer because I've seen and experienced really quite fast change. When somebody comes along with a system that works better for you in your everyday life, people change to it very quickly. You know, I remember being shown Google as a search, and I never used Alta Vista again. So I think what is key is, as I've gone into this, I've thought, okay, we've got to take one step at a time. First of all is checking that this idea kind of works for people. It did. Second is building it. It's not technologically difficult to build. So you've got to provide people with a platform. The third stage is helping people use it. And I'm hoping that if we provide a platform that is genuinely better day to day for all the different stakeholders, and that if we publicize this enough so that people are aware of it, they can use it, it's easy to use, we've designed it around their needs, then people will move towards it. And obviously I know that what drives researchers is institutions and funders, and what drives institutions and funders is researchers. So in a way, we've all got to sort of hold hands and take a big leap together. And until we built the platform, then we couldn't get everybody to come and use it. So now we've got to the point where we're building the platform and we've got to get people to use it. You mentioned whether people like Springer Nature are going to change. Well, I think what's interesting is that when you talk to people within the publishing system, you know, even publishers and editors, they recognize the benefits of the Octopus system, and they can see how it would actually work for research culture and research as a whole. They obviously have a well-embedded system that works for them and is profitable for them. But what they're doing, as I said at the beginning, is the dissemination part of it is their most profitable bit. Peer review, all of that, that's very expensive and difficult and time consuming for them, and something they actually want to minimize. So I'm sort of secretly hoping that for the bigger and better and more generalist journals, like the Natures, the Sciences, the whatevers, then they will actually find a benefit to working with Octopus in that way. Of course, there are a lot of journals in the world, and they're not all of that high quality, and some of them are making their business model through kind of exploiting the publish or perish society. And I'm not too worried about them having to lose out. But I think in terms of how long it's going to take, I don't know. I just hope that we can do it, because for me, this is the most important thing I can think of contributing to society, because we all rely on a really firm research base. You know, research and science and everything is so important to our culture that at the moment I just despair at seeing it not being supported by a really good system that makes it as good and solid as it can be and undermines our findings. So I really hope that we can all work together to make this work. And if anybody's got any good suggestions for what we should be doing, then absolutely, please do let us know.
Thank you. I think we'll have to draw to a close there. If anyone wants to download the chat, make sure you do that before you leave. There's Alex and John have responded to quite a few questions in that chat. So yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you so much to Alex and John and Lola. It's been a real privilege to really see the detail of this and to join the community of discussion. I think it's been really enriching, and I hope you found it useful as well.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. And do drop us all an email if you want to be involved more, or you've got more questions or thoughts.
Yeah, just to echo those thanks. And I mean, afterwards, Alex and John and Lola, maybe I could send a few of those questions your way, because I always write a blog after these things, and you know, we can sort of unpick some of them there if need be.
Yeah,
so yeah, thank
absolutely.
you very much.
If anybody's got questions, burning questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, then send them to Nick and we'll do our best.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. It always feels a bit strange with these virtual things when people sort of, if it was in a room, you'd say bye-bye, wouldn't you? And sort of, see you next time kind of thing. So, but I'll stick around with Rachel. But yeah, if you want to go, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.